Yes, people. So this is now my first earthquake related content for the year 2026. And in this content here, I am speaking specifically for the January 8th, 2026 earthquake, felt earthquake that occurred on mainland Jamaica. This earthquake, according to the earthquake unit of Jamaica, occurred approximately 5 kilometers north of Stony Hill. Now, what I want you to gather from this video chiefly are the following. One, the reality of active earthquake zones. Two, the significance of these light and less to moderate earthquake intensity that pretty much should be taken with consideration for relevance in the era of real estate, to say the least. So then, in this era of Stony Hill, what grabs my attention is the reality that, chiefly as you can see on this map, the approximate epicenter of the earthquake occurs in an area that you can see represents somewhat of a scarp on the Google terrain map. What I have done is that I have created some dash lines for you to be able to have a degree of an identification of what it is that I'm seeing. This scarp, earthquake scarp that is relatively big. And this scarp is significant in the context that it is a part of the Wagwater Fault zone. If you are aware of Jamaica's tectonics, the Wagwater Fault zone is connected to the Planting Garden Fault zone. And the Planting Garden Fault zone is pretty much connected to the fault zone that extends into Haiti. And if you are aware of Haiti's earthquakes, magnitude 7 plus in the 2010-2020 years, then you should understand that this zone pretty much can pack a serious punch. With all this being said, it brings me to the first point of mention, which is that this zone that is above or within the region of Stony Hill, you should consider it as an active fault zone. And yes, in terms of the geologic definition, an active fault zone is considered one that has ruptured within the last 10,000 years. I'm keeping it relevant for you. In terms of these Google images that you're seeing here, satellite images, these are pretty much highlighting the areas in Jamaica that I have plotted specific to the data provided by the earthquake unit of Jamaica in the public domain. And what it is that I am now beginning to see are the clusters. So the January 8th, 2026 earthquake that occurred 5 kilometers north of Stony Hill, that same region experienced a similar magnitude earthquake pretty much like within a year prior. I wanted to also gather or take from this that it was in 2024 that an earthquake in the magnitude 5.3 took place, also nearby the zone. As I highlight here in this image, you can see the relative location of that epicenter in reference to where Stony Hill is. So this basically plots it approximately 2 kilometers further relative to where the January 2026 earthquake epicenter is approximately located. So in essence, what you should see is that pretty much we are seeing a pattern of, ruptures within this area. Why is this important? Especially for interest in real estate, is because you see what you need to keep in mind is that it doesn't necessarily mean that an earthquake has to be moderate and above in magnitude and intensity for you to experience certain kind of changes to the landscape that can pose as a hazard to your property. What you have to keep in mind is that the epicenter, which is the location on the surface above the zone of rupture, it is pretty much me saying that we do not know what or how the landscape has changed underneath the epicenter itself. So, where your foundation is located, how deep your foundation is, the geology surrounding that, with each shaking of the ground per se, within, let's just say, the light zone at a very minimum, say magnitude 3, then that shaking nevertheless can result in sediment movement. Depending on groundwater levels, it pretty much can readjust the, the depth and the strength of the sediment itself. And what you also have to take into consideration is if it's a case where we're talking about, let's just say, a limestone area, and we have that degree of shaking, you can have subsurface collapse taking place. So those factors are the factors that make it relevant for us all in the context of our properties to ensure that we are aware about what the subsurface is looking like after each period of earthquake. Jamaica, in my knowledge, is not necessarily keeping a database on in terms of the geophysical status of Jamaica. And that, in my view, is where we need to make some serious changes in. If we're talking about, investing in infrastructural development, and if we're talking about rebuilding stronger, especially post Hurricane Melissa, then we not necessarily knowing what the geophysical status underneath the properties that we are rebuilding and or constructing, in my view, is madness. We need to ensure that we take note that earthquakes in and of themselves occur underground. Saying, if we have a fault scarp that we see on the surface, we must take into consideration that this is more than likely also extending underground, that can extend kilometers underground. And there can basically be a case where with each rupture, we have the sediment itself widening and we have groundwater itself changing. And in so doing, it means therefore that we can have weathering and erosion occurring at a faster pace, to say the least. We need, from that point of view, to start picking up the pace. Where it comes to the investment, whether it be from a public point of view and or in a private point of view, to the engineering firms, invest in geophysical studies on a consistent basis.